of the Amy Grasmick, the director of the Kimball Public Library, will be talking about the White River Time Exchange. And then for recorded talks, Marieke Sperry, the assistant director at hold on. The assistant director at the Quechee Library will be talking about their Upper Valley Sustainability Initiative. And Jill Anderson, reference librarian at Carpenter-Carse Library, will talk about an arts and crafts swap that they had. And finally, we will talk about the VLA Libraries and Sustainability Working Groups. So we will be following the ALA Code of Conduct. So of course, please behave respectfully and professionally. A link to the code can be found in the chat if you're interested. And Margaret, if you want to start, that would be awesome.
Great. Good afternoon, everybody. It's so nice to be here, and I'm excited to hear about everybody else's ideas and share a little bit about one of the programs that we've been part of in Charlotte. So I'm going to share my screen. We'll hope this works. It worked a minute ago. Here we go. Oop, that is not the one I want. So there we go. Can everybody see Repair Cafe? Awesome. Okay, so this is a program that we've run in Charlotte and the surrounding communities since 2017. Of course, last year we were unable to run our program, but we're looking forward to sort of getting back on track this year. And I just wanted to share a few details about it. And then if you're interested in more information, please feel free to, get in touch with me. Wouldn't it be awesome to have a whole Repair Cafe network in libraries across Vermont? So anyway, I don't know if you all are familiar with the idea of a Repair Cafe, but the started in the Netherlands, and it is a way for people to prevent appliances and clothing and that kind of thing from going to landfills, and instead creating a space and a place, a date where people can bring things to be repaired, everything from toasters to trench coats to bicycles. And not only does it sort of help with having us all, use our items more efficiently, but also creates a great sense of community. And that's certainly what we've experienced in Charlotte. So let's get started. As I mentioned, Repair Cafes were started in the Netherlands, and this is just an astounding, I'm not a huge metric person, but Repair Cafes prevented 420,000 kilos of waste from going into landfills in 2019. And according to one statistic I saw, that's the amount of fuel it would take to fly a full 747. So it's amazing what you can do. So anyway, I can't say enough great things about them. So I'll share a few of the steps that we went through as we put ours together. So the first thing you need to do is find your partners, something familiar to all of us in the library world. For us, this included our Transition Town group in Charlotte, the Charlotte Grange, the Charlotte Congregational Church, and our high school access class faculty as well. The next step is to select a site, and sometimes that's a little more challenging because you need a space where things can be spread out. You also, if you're going to really indulge yourself in the cafe side of things, you want someplace where you might have coffee and muffins or sandwiches and soup, depending on the timing of your event. But these are the sites that we used in the 3 years that we've run the Repair Cafe. So we did it in the town hall the first year, which was sort of a last minute switch. And the not recommended, but the other two sites were very successful. One was the church vestry of the Congregational Church in our town, and the other one was sort of the atrium, the big open meeting area at the local high school. And this is a photo from that event in 2019. And you can see, what a popular event this is, and also sort of how much space is really needed when you're planning all the things you're doing. This person in front is sharpening knives for people. So, and tools. So one of the many things that one could offer. And you, of course, need those people to help with all of those things, rounding up your repair crew. And as I think we all know, again, the same way as one might looking for partners to help hosting the event, reaching out every way we always do, friends and neighbors. If anybody's ever mentioned that they have a sewing machine and they, like running up curtains, well, maybe they'd like to bring it along and help, mend jackets. My daughter's beloved coat was given a new lease on life thanks to someone like that. And then you round up your repair crew. Here's just a couple photos of some of the folks that helped us out and some of the items they were repairing. Two high school students looking on as some jeans are getting repaired. Here's a gentleman doing some darning, which there's a lost art for you. And another gentleman who's helping with some sort of basic bike repair and tuning up. And some of the bigger things, we haven't managed this so much in Charlotte, but according to the information I've read, people sometimes bring in a photo, if it's a large piece of furniture, and they're like, I just need to know what I should do with this. And that helps them, get started and not have to throw something away. And then set your date. And we go with a 4-hour time frame. That seems to work out pretty well. And we have people sign up ahead of time, because that gives us an idea of how many people might be bringing things in to be repaired, and makes it a little bit more manageable. In addition to the folks who are going to be repairing things, you also need those cafe volunteers, bakers and lunch makers to bring in cookies and coffee and sandwiches and whatnot. And one other fun thing that we've done, which is also recommended, is to have a craft table for kids. So if someone's, bringing in their, lamps to be repaired and their 5-year-old comes along, there's a coloring table or something fun they can do as well. Although many of the kids end up being really fascinated by all of the repairs that are happening as well. And then you host your cafe. And here is one of our repair volunteers helping someone with some electronic repairs that need to be done. So I think it's just so invigorating and uplifting to me to see that, we really can take things apart and put them back together again. And then the biggest note, which I know we all like to keep in mind, is take notes for the next event, so that, the things that went well, you can make sure to do those, and the things that might need a little tweaking, you make note of those as well. And then a couple of resources for you to think about using. This is the website for the Repair Cafe. It comes in a variety of languages, but this is the English language site, and you can even download the whole manual. You can sign up as a Repair Cafe official site and that kind of thing. And then these are just a couple of books that we have in our collection, because I would like to think that the Repair Cafe sort of touches off, a repair revolution, as it says, so that we all can, keep in mind that, oh, I really couldn't figure out how to darn my socks or fix my toaster or whatever it is that might need to be done. So that's all I have for you, a little glimpse into the world of repair cafes at the Charlotte Library.
That is so cool, Margaret. I wonder if we want to wait for questions maybe at the end. Did you want to talk a little bit about your seed library too?
Sure, if you don't mind, I would love to talk about our seed library. I will try to be quick. All right. Oops, now I have to find that one. Sorry. Here we go. So Like many of you all, and I know Barbara is going to be sharing some of the details about their seed library in Windsor, we have a seed library in Charlotte, and I am very grateful for the two coordinators of this library that help keep it up and running in such a rewarding and enriching experience for our town. And as it says here, it's in support of communities, home food producers and seed savers. And one thing that we're trying to add in, which I know Barbara has sort of developed more fully, is also creating greater connections with our local food shelf. Excuse the dog in the background. So our mission is to encourage people to grow their own food and also to help cultivate healthy soils and biodiversity, with a real emphasis on heirloom varieties of seeds and open pollinated varieties that are easier to save. Our programs include the seed library with selected varieties of vegetables and pollinator friendly flowers and herbs. We also present a number of presentations and workshops with a range of people who can offer their expertise. We've had some successful book discussions as well. And we have a blog. I shouldn't really say we, they're the two coordinators are the ones who maintain that. And that's where you can find the latest information about what's happening with our seed library. And here's a couple of examples. So for garden care, we started off with creating healthy soils and composting, getting the most from your vegetable garden. We are fortunate enough to have Charlie Nardozzi come and do a talk about, healthy, safe, and environmentally friendly ways to manage the weeds and pests in your garden. Last year, prior to COVID, we had a specific focus on permaculture, and that included an introduction, a book group featuring the book Gaia's Garden, and then a landscape design class that focused on permaculture principles. And that ended up being the design that was developed for the new space around our library, which was really great. 2021 brought a different flavor of things. We're not able to open our library, so not able to offer our seeds. So instead, we had some Zoom book discussions, and we had we made our seeds available through a catalog. People could order online or by a phone, and then we would put out the packets of seeds to pick up in the same place they picked up library books and other materials. We're fortunate enough to be able to have space for a food garden. This was just taken last week. So here's the garlic that's growing, and then our two other raised beds, which will be filled with potatoes for our food shelf soon. And then we've done a couple other sort of make and take programs. We had garden starter kits for those in town who might be new to gardening and didn't want to, invest in 20 packages of seeds. And then just last week, in honor of World Bee Day, we put together some wildflower seed bombs that people could make, and then you throw them out into your garden and you get wildflowers and help pollinators thrive in your garden. And then we have some programs and partnerships we're looking forward to cultivating a bit more. One is to work on becoming part of the Pollinator Pathway organization, and we would like to continue to cultivate our connections with Slow Food Vermont. We've done a couple of things with them, and if any of you have been part of our Plant a Seed program, you'll know that that came through Slow Food Vermont as well. And of course, we would love to hear from you. Here's the contact information, and I can easily make that available elsewhere. So that's about it for our seed library. Thanks so much for letting me take a little time to share that with you as well.
That is awesome, Margaret. Thank you for that. So I just wanted to kind of segue off of the seed library talk. I'm going to share my screen. Hold on one second. I just wanted to tell you the Windsor Public Library just got one of the ALA Libraries Transforming Communities grants to tighten the web of food security in Windsor. We just wanted to build ties between our seed library with the Windsor community gardens and also with our local food pantry. So the things we're going to do as far as that, one, we're going to start having, adding gardening tools to our library of things. Unfortunately, we don't have much space, so we'll mostly be getting, things that can lean up against the wall, like post hole diggers, post hole pounders, shovels, spades, trowels, things like that. But like so many gardening tools, you really don't need to own. You can just borrow, and that will really people with more space. How awesome to be able to actually be able to offer, wheelbarrows or even mulchers, things like that. And we, part of the grant was to put in 2 more beds into the Windsor Community Gardens. So we had a volunteer build our beds. We bought cedar, 12-inch wide cedar, and made 4x8, 2 4x8 beds. And we were all excited to put them behind the garden, behind the library, next to our other 2 community garden beds there. And our neighbor was like, "Are you a library or a garden?" So we, to make the neighbor happy, we ended up moving those beds to the Windsor Fairgrounds, but we will still be able to use them. And then, I don't know if you've heard of Vermont Victory Gardens. It was started in 2020 by Gordon Clark up in the Burlington area, but now it's kind of statewide, and it does a bunch of things like, so it teaches gardening schools to folks who need food, and it allows gardeners to share their veggies with food pantries, etc. So gardeners with their own gardens can join and pledge, share so much food with the food pantry. But master gardeners can also, sign in with them and actually be there to help gardeners learn more how to grow food, which is really, really cool. And the Windsor Community Gardens is going to become one of the Vermont Victory Gardens garden organizations. And we're going to be doing a multi-week book discussion of The Resilient Gardener by Carol Depp. And this book is, it's not just a gardening book, it's like a gardening, when life is difficult, whether you're dealing with climate change or you're dealing with, sickness in your house, or dealing with, working 70 hours a week, how can you still make your garden thrive and be able to feed you? So we purchased 10 copies of this book for the discussion, and they will be available for interlibrary loan and some other Vermont libraries interested. And we, of course, we're going to have a kids gardening project component where, kids will be able to plant seeds in little pots and take them home to grow them and then bring them back for the garden. And it's going to tie up with a community meeting where we're just going to have the involved stakeholders come and talk about how best to solve hunger in Windsor. We'll have seed library participants there. We will have users of the food pantry there. We will have members of Windsor Community Gardens, and there will be stipends available too for people who use the food pantry and otherwise really wouldn't be able to afford to take an hour off of their schedule. So that's what we're starting, and I'll let you know how that goes. Amy, do you want to talk about the White River Time Exchange? I'm excited about this.
Thanks, Barbara. You two rock, by the way. I'm ready to do a repair cafe. So I'm sort of moving sideways from sustainability to maybe the larger idea of resilience. Resilience being the wherewithal that a community has to withstand and rebound from a disaster or a crisis, kind of like a pandemic maybe. So 2 of the people that I think write or speak really eloquently about public libraries and resilience are Eric Kleinenberg. I'm sure folks have read Palaces for the People, right? If you haven't, you should. And also Rebecca Smith Aldrich, who's like the high priestess of the role of public libraries of all kinds, really, in community resilience. And, as a little ancillary, it's not really an ancillary side thing, I shouldn't say it that way, but the uneven effect of climate change and racial injustice and how those two things are interlinked. So, you know, public libraries are powerful in these ways because public libraries are really key to social infrastructure. We all know this, right? This is not anything new. One of the tools that Kimball Library is exploring as a way to help community members build connections with one another is by establishing a time exchange. So I'm going to share a screen, and I promise I will put the links to the websites I'm going to show you in the chat when I'm done, but I am absolutely not going to try to do it at the same time. So anyway, we're here right now at timebanks.org. This is like the premier site in the United States, I think, to learn about time banking. So just to kind of distill it, a time bank is a way for community members or members of the time bank to share their time and their talents with one another. It provides a mechanism whereby I can offer up skills that I have to anybody in the community who needs them. And likewise, I can make requests of my community members for assistance that I need. So for instance, I need a zipper fixed on my winter coat, Margaret. So I posted that as a request on our time exchange. There are tenets that underpin the concept of a time exchange. One of them is that everybody in the community has something of value to share with other members of the community. Another is that there are types of work that people don't really get compensated for, like raising a family, like promoting democracy, like fighting racial injustice. And those are valuable and they should be recognized as such. So those are things that also can be offered up or requested in a time exchange. The concept of reciprocity, you know, a time exchange is not a barter. It's not like I do one thing for you and you do one thing for me. It has more to do with I do one thing for you, somebody else does, you know, you do something for somebody else, right? So it's this web of connections that happen, not kind of a one-to-one exchange. Social networks, I just mentioned that, and respect, so that we meet people where they are. We learn that they have skills and talents that are valuable to our community. And we learn something about somebody we never knew before. So like I said, timebanks.org, this is a site we're looking at right here. They provide a software platform that's called Community Weaver 3. It's used across the United States and internationally. And it's a platform that makes time banking really quite simple as long as you have an internet connection, of course. So Kimball Library partnered with Bale, or Building a Local Economy, which is based in South Royalton. I'm going to change tabs. Can somebody tell me if you can see the Bale website now? Okay, great. I never trust that it's gonna work. Anyway, Bale's mission is, you know, it's tiny, so tiny. Their vision, they say, is to build a sustainable culture that can foster the economic and ecological capacity in our communities to thrive, even as the external forces of climate disruption threatens our existence as a species. So like I said, it's really small. Clearly, they're a natural partner for the work that we want to do around a time exchange. And that's great. You know, we share the responsibility for running the time exchange. We share the cost. There are 2 additional community members who are providing their person power to market and to run the exchange. But I do want to say that this is something I truly believe that if you're interested in doing it at your library, you could do it. Like, don't let not having a partner stand in your way of trying this. There is a cost involved. It's a small cost to use the Community Weaver platform. I don't know how well you can read this, but it's based on how many members you have. So the first year is $79. Right now we have just under 80 members in our time exchange, the White River Time Exchange. So next year we'll pay $165 to have access to the platform. You know, it's pretty darn affordable, in my opinion. So let me give you a little look at what the time exchange looks like. So this is our site, whiterivertimeexchange.org. And I actually need to minimize this so I can get at some stuff. There we go. So even if you're not logged in, even if you're not a member, you can still get a flavor for what the time exchange looks like. So if I click up here on offers, for instance, you can see some of the offers that members of the time exchange have put out, right? If you need a lift because you're doing one segment of the Appalachian Trail, there's a member who's willing to drive you back to your car, which is pretty cool. Sewing is there. I really should reach out to her or him or her about my zipper. But you will be amazed at the things that people will offer up. Like if you need fecal egg counts for your horses, this is the place to come. Who knew, right? So it's just incredible, the broad range of offers that are made. And similarly, you can see what requests have been put out there. For instance, sock darning, Margaret, again, I mean, it's just crazy how these things dovetail, right? So, so that's pretty much what you can see without being logged in. You're not going to get any further details about who's offering up the services or making the offers without being logged in. At least that's how we've set this one up with an eye toward privacy. No surprise there, right? But this is what it looks like as a coordinator. So I'm a coordinator. I have more permissions on this site than a member does. A member's page might look slightly different than mine, but you know, you kind of get a snapshot here at the dashboard. Again, you can see the requests, you can see the offers. You can also, I as a coordinator, any of the coordinators can put news on here. We have access to a calendar. So the functionality on this site, I think, is pretty fantastic. I have run into very few problems with it, and whatever few problems I've had, I've gotten response from their tech support really rapidly. So I think it's really well-developed software, which is important to know if you're going to be running this. I want to point out a couple of the things that have been useful to us, if I can get at it. There we go. So here's some of the things as a coordinator that I have access to, like I can look at the member accounts and all kinds of stuff. One of the things that was important for us is to be able to define neighborhoods. So we're the White River Time Exchange, right? We serve the White River watershed of Vermont, which is a rather large area. And we understood that maybe somebody who's in Norwich is not likely to want to do an exchange with somebody who's in Braintree, right? Those are pretty far apart. So we added a list of neighborhoods that allows people to get a better sense of whether they are able to feasibly make an exchange with another member. Another bit of functionality that I like is that you can send out broadcast emails. So you can pick and choose who among the membership you send these notices to. Sometimes we send things out to the entire membership. Sometimes it's targeted. Here's the congratulations to Acorn and Sally, who did the first White River Time Exchange. Yay, good on them. So this brings me to the lessons that we've learned. We've only been running the time exchange for a few months now. But I will say I was intimidated by doing this for way too long. I did not need to be so nervous about what it was going to take to, manage the time exchange. But it's like any other kind of library program, right? You have to plan, you have to figure out how to get in touch with people, how to spread the word about this service. What's your marketing going to be like? How are you going to keep people invested and interested? That's really no different than the marketing work we already do, but keep it in mind, it's there. We found that it's been easy to get people to join. Like Front Porch Forum and the Upper Valley Listserv have been marvelous to encourage people to join the time exchange. What has been more challenging is helping people find momentum to actually make exchanges with one another. So it was quite a while before that, yay, first exchange around sock darning took place. And we're still finding our footing for what's the right rhythm of sending out broadcasts to say, hey, remember to check, you know, see what's on offer. Remember to see if there are any requests you can fill. So that we're still working on, but I encourage you to try it. So that's all I have to say. I'm going to put those links in the chat, and if we have time for questions later, I'm happy to answer.
That is so cool, Amy. Thank you. I'm going to share my screen. I have a YouTube, which hopefully will be visible, from Marieke Sperry at the Quechee Library about their sustainability efforts. Did you?
Barbara, I'm not sure anybody can see or hear the video.
Uh-oh. Ooh. Uh-oh. Oh. Shoot, really? Shoot. It looks like it's playing on my end. I'm sorry. Let me rats. Because I'm seeing and hearing it. And it says that it's sharing my screen. Yeah, I can definitely share the link. Because it's a wonderful video. It's a little bit, oh darn, that's too bad. Huh. All right. Well, phooey. Okay. All right, rats. That's too bad.
Barbara, I would just try sharing your screen one more time and make sure that you pick there's like a bunch of different windows you can choose from, and just make sure you pick the one to share that has the video in it.
Yeah, I was just sharing the link, what's the URL, which is on YouTube. Do you see it?
I can see it. If you press start,
Hit
maybe
the, hit
that will do
the,
it.
yeah, hit the play arrow.
Now, can you see it? Because it's playing for me.
No.
Phooey.
Just black.
That's too bad. Oh no. Shoot. I am happy to share the link. Here, I will
Barbara, might I propose you go ahead and share the link and maybe Margaret can play the other video?
yeah, let me do that. Yep, I will do that. Shoot. Okay.
The ongoing mysteries of Zoom technology.
Darn.
Just when we think we've got it figured. So let's hope this other one, who knows what's going to happen. But I will try to share my screen and see what happens. You'll probably see a variety of things come up just because. Where are we? I had it open.
I totally watch because that's a wonderful video that she did. It's really nice.
Right, sorry, this is taking me a minute now too. There we go. Okay. I never feel very graceful when I do this. Okay. There, can everybody see that? All right, let's hope that you can all hear it.
Origami, beading, all sorts of things. We had asked on our flyer and in our other forms of advertising that people donate, gently used or like new materials. Basically things that you would be happy to find yourself at a swap in the condition that you would appreciate. And we received, a varied amount of compliance with that request. Going forward, we would probably be stricter about what we accepted. Maybe take a better look at things as they came in and just send things back with people that we really knew that we would not be able to use. Thanking them for their interest in helping us, but we just wouldn't be able to use certain items based on condition. Find a more graceful way of saying it, but yeah, going in, you have to have that expectation that people are maybe not, on the same wavelength as you in terms of what is good condition, and being able and ready to deal with that in the moment. People who brought in donations were given a ticket, kind of like a raffle ticket type of ticket, which granted them early bird access to the swap. Like I said, the swap was held on a Saturday from 11 to 2, and the early bird people were allowed in at 10:30 to get first dibs. And I think people really thought that was fun and appreciated, that little added benefit for donating to the swap. Because obviously we wouldn't have been able to hold it without the donations. So we thought, why not give those folks, a special thank you, and that ticket really seemed to delight quite a few of them. We had about probably between 30 and 40 people come on the day of the swap. It was over the course of 3 hours. So, there were some busy times, there were some slower times. It was never hard to handle, never too many people. We asked that people bring their own bags. Most people did. We had a few for those who didn't or forgot their bag. Kids came. Kids seemed to be, the most excited about being able to come to the swap and found the most exciting stuff. But we had a wide range of ages and all sorts of folks coming to check it out. Everybody walked away with something. On the day of the swap and even leading up to it, perhaps, I would suggest having some volunteers lined up. We did not do that, but that is one of the things that I learned. Would have been helpful to have a few people in the room to keep things organized and to help clean up at the end. other members of our staff definitely assisted me with the organization and the setup and cleanup, but I think might have been better suited to you know, volunteers. Going forward, we would do that. I apologize if you can hear my chickens in the background. Oh boy. Anyway, they're begging to be let out of their coop. So what else can I say? We advertised, did I already talk about, my chicken has completely distracted me. I think I already talked about how we advertised, and that Front Porch Forum was the best and most easily seen form of advertising. We had actually wanted to hold a toy swap as well the next month in March 13th or 14th, but that obviously got.
Do we want to stop this one here?
We're going to run the toy swap a little differently, where it was, you know, bring the toys on the day of the swap.
Sure.
And then maybe, do you want to try to play the other one, Margaret? You're too busy behaving better than my iPhones.
Sure. Let me, yeah, if you want to, maybe if people have questions or something, you could start that and I'll go look for that link.
Yeah, I put it on the chat.
Oh, awesome. All right. I'll see how that works. Hang on just a second.
And that's only a 6-minute video, and then we'll have time for
I'm going to give it a go. Can you see that? All right. Can you hear it?
To the Quechee Library. I'm Marieke, the assistant librarian here, and you will meet Kate, the director, in a little bit. We were delighted to be asked to talk a little bit about sustainability at our library, as well as the library that we administer at the Wilder Club and Library in Wilder, Vermont. When hearing that we were doing a summary talk about sustainability in libraries, one of our trustees was a bit surprised, and he said, "Isn't that the essence of libraries?" And he's right. We all are all about sharing items, reducing waste and consumerism, creating collections that inform and enlighten, which for years now has meant acquiring good materials about climate, recycling, etc., and developing programs around that. Activities and crafts, we specifically choose materials that will not add to the waste stream in society. And so we collect a lot of materials that are recycled or recyclable. And we also specifically pick projects for children that teach them about reusing things, or that are things they can take home and use. So a good example of that would be one of these big jars. This one says made by Susie Smith. At the time when we used these big ones, we collected them from volunteers and community members, and we filled them with beans to make bean soup and other ingredients that they needed. They made the recipes on pretty paper, and they took them home as gifts, and they reused the jars. We try to use local foods as much as we can, both for kids programs as well as when we have refreshments for our adult programs. So we try to make sure that we reuse and recycle and reduce trash all the time, especially when we do kids programs, to educate them on all of those things. Next up is Library Director Kate Shaw.
Sustainability accomplishment that we are most proud of came back in 2014 when Ginny and Ted Taylor of, appropriately enough, the Sun Up Foundation offered us a grant to support the solar panels installation. We did our usual fundraising for quite a while, worked with Efficiency Vermont, and there they are. Now we have summers when we produce more electricity than we can use, and be forewarned, after 5 years or so, many people don't even know that they exist, that we have them, but we know, and we try to mention it as often as possible.
More recently, we installed dual process air conditioning at both our Quechee and Wilder sites for better energy efficiency. This is an example of a PR email sent to our local listserv. We, of course, are careful to economize paper use in our office work and are more selective than we once were about what we print for the public. Still, we recognize that electronic communication alone does not get us close enough to the goal of inclusiveness and impact. In the meantime, we do post on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Word of mouth is often still the best way to advertise.
Traditional objects, so many of us have embraced the idea of having these in our collections. And so our non-traditional objects include moon binoculars, a new telescope that's not here yet, puzzles, which became so incredibly popular this last winter, and then our 80-year-old, at least, punch bowl, which came from neighbors who once lived up the road, old-time Vermonters who clearly dined a lot and entertained a lot, and they used to come down every snowstorm and shovel our walkways. So every time the punch bowl and the cups get loaned, we do remember Theo and Harry Howe.
Other non-traditional items that we loan out at the Quechee and Wilder libraries include, but are not limited to, a party tent for outside use. We loan out our foldable tables. Our game selection grows by the day. We have games for literally every age. Many a patron has made use of our dolly, both for moving or for helping their children move. And in addition, although not a non-traditional item, we have our book sale, which is ongoing throughout the year so that we can reuse and recycle. As we speak about the pandemic, as we all will forever now, another reason we chose to stay as open as possible was the conviction that our services are, shall we say, more essential to some than to others. Not everyone has the option of buying what is needed or borrowing and viewing online, of seeing another person, if even behind a mask. Sustainability to us means trying to welcome more people. As we all know, books about Appalachian librarians on horseback are very popular today. We too are librarians on horseback, and we're taking the next step. Our particular Vermont horses have a definite preference for just pastures and woods. Fortunately, we ride in the Hartford Town Forest when we can, and this has led us to our main summer program, a scavenger hunt for all ages in July, culminated with an August celebration. It'll give us a marvelous chance to highlight books, quotes, and art about the environment and sustainability throughout the summer. This is important to each of us, and we certainly want to kindly remind every new, as well as old Vermont resident, of the responsibilities that go with our stewardship of our land and our climate.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that.
You're welcome.
Do you want to talk about the sustainability working group with VLA and then questions? Does that sound good?
Margaret, you're muted.
There, I just wanted to make sure I wasn't sharing ongoing YouTube videos in the background. As I mentioned at the beginning, it was so exciting to hear about the efforts that other libraries have started and to share a little bit about what we are doing in Charlotte. And so Jennifer Esser, who is also in this meeting, and I are part of a Libraries Combating Climate Change course that we have both been taking. And one of the things that we wanted to put sort of make as a project to come out of that is to create a sustainable libraries working group here in Vermont. And the VLA, I spoke with Mike and with Kevin, and they were enthusiastic in their support of this. And so we would just like to issue an invitation to all of you to join us. We'll be having a planning meeting coming up sometime soon, don't know when yet. And if you're interested in helping us put the working group together, we'd love to hear from you about that. And if you're interested, we all have so much going on. If that's, you know, more than you can manage now, but you're interested in the ideas, let me know that as well. We'll sort of create a couple of mailing lists, and we'd love to know what other ideas people have to be part of that. So I'll put my email address in the chat, and I'll hope to hear from as many of you as possible. I think that's about it, unless Jennifer, I missed something, and please feel free to jump in if I did.
Does anyone have any questions about everything that we've been learning about, especially the ones that were in person?